My name is Autumn. I'm 34 years old, living and working in New York in the finance field. I never thought there would come a day when I'd have to expose the truth right in the middle of my own mother's birthday party, in front of relatives, friends, and people I once believed were my blood. That night, beneath shimmering lights and the clinking of wine glasses, my mother stood up at the table and spoke clearly, without the slightest hesitation. My eldest daughter, Autumn, even though she works in finance, will never measure up to her younger sister. Grace is the true pride of this family. She turned to hold Grace's hand, smiling as though she was showing off a trophy. People nodded, laughed politely. I sat there frozen. I didn't say a word. I just opened my purse and pulled out a folder I had carried for 3 days, never expecting to use it in this moment. On the white tablecloth, I laid down the evidence. I had been paying my parents' mortgage for 2 years, covering Grace's graduate tuition, and even paying off credit card bills they called emergencies. The table went cold. And in that moment, I realized sometimes, to reclaim respect, you have to stand up in the middle of a party and say what no one else dares to say. Have you ever been belittled by your own family in front of a crowd? Have you ever stayed silent only to realize your sacrifices were seen as nothing more than expected? If you've ever felt that way, share your thoughts below. Hit like, subscribe, and follow me through this journey because the story behind that dinner table is longer than you imagine. I remember so clearly my college years when classmates had parents paying for housing, books, even a brand new laptop every semester. I, on the other hand, waited tables at a small cafe near the dorms from 6 a.m. until noon just to make it to class by 1 p.m. In the evenings, I worked remotely entering data for an insurance company in Boston. Some nights I fell asleep at my desk, fingers still resting on the keyboard. My mother used to call me with that soft yet cutting tone. You're the older sister. You're stronger. You need to push harder. To set an example for Grace. Those words echoed like a chorus all through my youth. Be an example. Push harder. Handle it yourself. And Grace? She went to private school, lived in a small apartment my mother rented near campus, and drove a brand new Volkswagen my father gave her for graduating high school. While I, the eldest daughter, still rode an old bicycle, my knees bandaged from a fall on my way home after a night shift. I never blamed Grace. She's 4 years younger, always sheltered. I used to drive her to dance lessons, summer camps, dentist appointments whenever my mother was too busy. Grace had golden hair that bounced in soft waves, a smile as bright as a toothpaste ad, and a way of speaking that made people melt. I once believed I was born to lift her up, like a loyal shadow. I truly believed that until her college graduation day. The ceremony was in a grand Manhattan theater. My parents sat front row. I arrived late after postponing an urgent meeting at work. As I entered, I saw my father hold up a set of car keys glinting under the lights, handing them to Grace. We've wanted to give you this for so long. You deserve a strong start. Grace hugged our parents, tears streaming down her cheeks. I stood in the back row, holding my small gift, a leather notebook I had chosen carefully, her name embossed in the corner. My mother saw me, gave me a small nod, then turned away. I sat down, hollow inside. You look tired, my mother said later at home. Why don't you rest instead of burying yourself in work? I pressed my lips together and said nothing. In the kitchen, Grace was on the phone gushing to friends about her new car. Autumn, did you see it? She shouted. It has heated seats, a touch screen. I'm driving it to my interview. Next week. I nodded, smiled faintly, and closed my bedroom door. Silence had become my armor. From that day forward, I no longer expected recognition from my parents. I threw myself into work. From financial associate, I became an analyst, then a department head. I bought my first small apartment in Brooklyn with my bonus. No one in my family asked what it took to get there. No one called to congratulate me. When I was invited to speak at a national investment conference, I texted the family group chat. No one replied, except Grace, who sent a flower sticker. I didn't blame her. She likely never knew what I went through. But one Tuesday night, when my father called with a hoarse voice saying the family was having a little financial trouble, I didn't hesitate. I wired the first mortgage payment so they wouldn't fall behind. My father promised to repay me in 2 months. The third month passed without mention, then the fourth. The fifth, when I asked, my mother said, Grace is in grad school. She can't focus if she's worrying about the house. Just give a hand. It's nothing big. I clenched my teeth, opened my wallet, and sent more money. I didn't even question why Grace continued grad school when the family was supposedly struggling. I simply told myself, I can handle it, so I will. I didn't buy a new bed, still sleeping on a sagging mattress. I skipped my first vacation in 3 years because of those payments. I declined dental insurance upgrades to keep the budget for the mortgage transfer, and every time I visited, I still heard my mother tell the neighbors, Autumn is so busy she doesn't care about family. Thank goodness for Grace, who's always close. I remember one late night, sitting alone in my kitchen, staring at Grace's credit card bill I had just paid. It listed a fine Italian dinner, a weekend spa trip in the Hamptons, fees for makeup, and dresses for networking events. I gave a dry laugh, drank a glass of water, and went back to work. I thought silence was noble. Until that birthday party when my mother raised her glass and told everyone, Autumn is smart, sure, but the kind of smart no one remembers. Grace, though, she has charm, she has direction. We are truly proud to have a daughter like her. I heard every clink of cutlery, every shallow breath held back. No one reacted, no one defended me. Not even Grace, who sat beside me staring down at her red wine glass, silent. I sat there, gripping the strap of my purse, my chest pierced by 100 needles, but I didn't swallow it down. I slowly opened my purse and pulled out the folder I had prepared. Each page showed account numbers, transfer dates, payment details, and recipients. I placed it gently on the table, sliding it toward my mother. For the past 2 years, the so-called failure you talk about, I said, has been paying the mortgage, tuition, and all those small things you dismiss. My mother froze for a few seconds, her eyes wide. Then she gave a small laugh, steady voice. It's all for family, everyone helps each other. But no one helps me, I replied. Not one person. Autumn, this is only temporary. We'll pay you back soon. Just once. I can still recall my father's apologetic voice when he called late one night 2 years ago. I had just finished a long client meeting, exhausted, still in my heels when the phone rang. Through the city's hum outside my window, his breathless tone made me think something serious had happened. We're having a little issue with this month's mortgage payment, he said slowly. We just need you to cover 1 month. Your mom's trying, but it's not enough. I didn't think twice. I'll transfer it tonight, I answered, opening my laptop, pulling up my bank login. I wrote down the account number, noted the date, then texted, It'll be fine, just helping when needed. The next month, no one mentioned it. I thought it was resolved. But by the 3rd month, my mother called again, casual as a breeze. Autumn, your dad's still working on renewing an investment contract. Returns aren't in yet. Can you help just 1 more month? I didn't ask. I transferred. And again, after that, 6 months passed. One night, reviewing expenses before tax season, I noticed 5 consecutive transfers from my account into my parents' joint account, each over $1,200. I paused, highlighter in hand, then marked them with small red stars. I promised myself I'd ask. But the chance never came. Instead came more casual requests. Grace lost her part-time job in communications. She has to focus on grad school. Do you want her to drop out just because of tuition? Grace's car needs new tires. Winter is coming. She has to drive to Brooklyn for her internship. That's urgent. Your dad borrowed a bit for stock investments. They guaranteed returns in 6 months. He'll repay the principal and interest then. Every time I logged it into a small brown notebook, partly from habit as a finance professional, partly to reassure myself. I didn't want to think I was being used. I wanted to believe this was family. Who keeps score with family? So I lived like that with a twisted budget, always putting family first. I declined a Vermont trip with coworkers. I canceled my gym membership, dropped my weekend yoga class. I refused to upgrade software I needed for work, telling myself it wasn't necessary yet. I told myself, things will settle back to normal. Until the day a strange bill arrived at my apartment. The addressee was Autumn Weller, but the charge was for a new semester's tuition at a communications school in Chicago. Student, Grace Weller. I froze at the doorway, holding the paper. I hadn't enrolled in any program. I'd never authorized anyone to use my name for tuition payments. But what cut deepest wasn't the fraud itself. It was the tiny note in the corner. Payment scheduled automatically from linked account, Autumn W. When I called my mother, she sighed. Oh, honey, don't make this a big deal. Your dad had the accountant set it up temporarily. Grace is too busy to handle it herself. You have plenty. Helping her a bit won't hurt you. You think I have plenty? I repeated. You have a good job. Live alone, no burdens. Grace, on the other hand, has to network, build her image. It's not as easy for her as it is for you. That sentence replayed in my head for weeks. Not as easy as me? I wasn't gifted a car after graduation. I wasn't given an apartment by my parents. I wasn't spared student loans. I fought through everything on my own, late nights, skipped meals, endless client meetings. And yet they still saw me as the one who needs no help. I began gathering every receipt, bank statement, copies of bills, and transaction emails. Each night after finishing work, I spent 2 hours at my desk, sorting through every document, numbering each expense, writing down the dates, recipients, and reasons for each transfer. I created a summary chart, printed it, and taped it inside the cover of a black binder. On the very last page was a figure I had never dared to face directly. $61,400. I stared at it for a long time, not out of regret, out of anger at myself. No one forced me to do those things. No one held a gun to my head. But they had never once said, thank you. They simply assumed I had the obligation to sacrifice, that I was the silent foundation, allowing my sister to shine. I once thought giving would make them understand, would make them acknowledge me. But I was wrong. Silence didn't make them grateful, it made them exploit me more. I didn't often visit my parents' house, but as tax season approached, my mother called with a voice both weary and carefully measured, as if she had rehearsed it. Autumn, are you free this weekend? I'm drowning in these tax papers. You're good at this stuff. I'm sure you can handle it quickly. I was about to refuse. But then I thought, at least it was a chance to face the numbers I had been quietly carrying for 2 years. I agreed, and on Saturday morning I drove out to the suburbs, bringing my laptop and an external hard drive. The house was the same, so tidy it felt empty, with the faint smell of wood polish clinging even to the old curtains. My mother had stacked a pile of documents on the dining table. She called out from the kitchen, "The files from last year are separate. Just go through the deductions and medical expenses." I sat down, opened my laptop, and began typing. My father was in the backyard tending his roses, and Grace wasn't home yet. I checked each form, bill, charity receipt, and bank record. Some items were familiar, others were not. One folder was thicker than the rest, clipped together with a note scrawled in blue ink. Supplemental investments. Curious, I opened it. Inside were statements from an account I had never seen before, under my father's name. Deposits of $2,500 came in every month from a financial company in Connecticut. I quickly checked the IRS system and confirmed this was legitimate private investment income. What shocked me wasn't its legality, but the fact that my father had never mentioned it. I had been covering their bills for 24 months, believing they were truly struggling, while he was receiving over $30,000 a year from another source. I pulled out the household income summary, and there my own name appeared in tuition payments, in student loan interest, even in personal credit card payments. But I had never signed any student loan paperwork for Grace. I held up one statement that spelled it out: spring semester tuition payment, Chicago School of Communications. Payer, Autumn Weller. Below, it was my bank's official stamp. My throat tightened. I flipped to the next page. A MacBook Pro invoice. Then orders for luxury brand clothing. Airline tickets to Las Vegas, business class. All charged to a credit card under my name, a card I had never even held, but had clearly been linked to my account for years. My mother walked in just as I was holding the statement, her face lighting with relief. "How's it going?" I placed the papers down, forcing my voice calm. "Mom, whose credit card is this?" She froze for a moment, then moved to pour herself a glass of water. "Oh, that. Your dad set it up for Grace. She needed a laptop for school. You didn't notice, so he just used your name for a low-interest student loan. But it's fine, you've been paying it off already, right?" I stared at her. "Mom, do you hear yourself? That's an account under my name. If Grace doesn't pay, I'm the one responsible." She set the glass down gently, as if to smooth the air. "You're overreacting. We're family. Helping your sister is helping yourself. If Grace succeeds, the whole family benefits." I didn't respond. I turned back to the pile, flipping further. The next sheet was a car lease contract, also under my name, paid from a secondary account. Suddenly, I remembered Grace once texting me about test driving a new SUV, super smooth. When I asked how she could afford it, she just laughed. "Got lucky, sis." I exhaled, pushed my chair back. I need some air. I walked out to the porch where my father was trimming roses. "Dad, can you tell me what that Connecticut account is?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp enough to make him stop. He looked up, startled. "How did you find out?" "Tax records. Private investment income." I thought the family was struggling. He set his clippers on the stone ledge, meeting my eyes. "I was going to tell you later. It's from a share I invested in years ago." "Then why let me carry the mortgage for 2 years?" He glanced at the roses, as if searching for an excuse among the petals. "I thought, you could handle it. You're capable. You're fine." "Grace, though." He hesitated. "She's more fragile. If she knew we were tight on money, she couldn't focus." I stood in silence for a long moment. "So, you let me carry everything? Because I didn't complain? Because I didn't break? You assumed I could take it?" He didn't deny it. I turned back inside. My mother had set out a fruit tray, calling from the dining room. "Grace will be home soon. Try to smile, don't make things tense." I didn't answer. I just stared at the stack of files. Numbers don't lie. Those transactions were proof of the unfair expectation my parents had pinned on me, a house rule no one had ever asked me if I agreed to. I stayed silent the rest of that afternoon. After returning from the porch, I sat in the living room beside the ticking wall clock, its steady beat indifferent to arguments it had never heard. I gazed out the window at the last rays of sun stretching across the dry lawn, my chest heavy as stone. Grace came home near 6 p.m. She walked in with softly curled hair, a tailored white blouse, and an expensive handbag slung casually over her shoulder. As usual, she kissed Mom first, smiled at Dad, then noticed me. Her eyes paused a beat, surprised, before settling back into her practiced smile. "When did you get here? Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, sitting beside me and scrolling her phone. I looked at her without replying. I saw her ease, the comfort of someone who had never been asked to worry about anyone but herself. My mother carried out grilled chicken and salad, her voice cheerful as though the morning's discoveries hadn't happened. "Everyone sit down." I made Italian chicken, Autumn's favorite. I rose, pulled the binder from my bag by the sofa, and walked slowly to the table. My father pulled out a chair for me. I didn't sit. I opened the binder and placed it squarely in the center. My voice was low but steady. "Before we eat, I want everyone to look at this." My mother frowned at the stack. Grace put down her phone, leaning forward slightly. "What is it?" she asked. "A detailed record of every expense I've covered for this family over the last 2 years," I said, turning the first page. "Mortgage, tuition, credit cards, living costs. It's all here." No one spoke. I turned page after page, reading out loud in an even tone. Mortgage, $1,200 a month for 24 months. Total, $28,800. Grace's tuition loan, $19,400. Credit cards and other expenses, $9,200. Additional items: car registration, repairs, overdue utilities, $3,600. Grand total, $61,000. I closed the binder. The air seemed sucked from the room. Grace's eyes widened, lips pressed tight. My father avoided my gaze, while my mother raised her brows, speaking slowly. "Families help each other, Autumn. Your sister is just building her career. You're already settled." "Settled?" I let out a sharp laugh. Settled enough to delay my own loan payments to cover someone else's? Settled enough to skip dental care because I couldn't afford it? You call that settled? My mother folded her napkin carefully, laying it on the table. "Don't exaggerate, you always have money. You're single, good salary, no kids, no real responsibilities. Your sister is different." I looked her straight in the eye. "You're right, I don't have kids, but I do have responsibilities. Because you and Dad dumped them all on me 20 years ago." She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I've stayed silent long enough. Every call for money," I answered. "Every promise to pay me back later was forgotten. Every time I asked, you told me not to keep score in the family." "But do you ever ask who's been carrying this family?" My father coughed, rubbing his face. Grace finally spoke, her voice small. "I didn't know you paid that much." I turned to her. "Grace, you didn't need to know. You never asked, you just received." Everything appeared as if by magic. I thought Mom and Dad paid," she whispered. "Mom told me you didn't mind." I sat down, my voice softer but firm. "It's not about minding. It's about respect. It's about fairness. You've been given everything since high school. And me? I was expected to always be strong. But no one stays strong when they're drained like this." My mother clenched her hands, voice sharp as ice. "You're being unreasonable. This family has never played favorites. Grace just needed more help. She's sensitive, easily hurt. You're stronger, so you can handle more." I looked at my mother, my chest tightening with both anger and sorrow. "No one is born to be someone else's backdrop, Mom. No matter how strong I am, I'm still human. I get tired. I need to be recognized. But not once has anyone in this family ever asked me, 'Are you tired?'" Grace shrank back, her eyes unsettled. My father gave a small nod. as if forced to acknowledge something he had long ignored. My mother stood, walked into the kitchen, then returned with a glass of orange juice, placing it in front of me. If you're tired, drink this. Don't turn family dinner into an interrogation. I drew a deep breath, set my hand on the binder, and pulled it toward me. I won't say anything more. Just one thing. Starting today, I'm ending all financial support. I am not an ATM. I stood. No one stopped me. The whole house sank into a suffocating silence. My mother leaned against the kitchen counter, her face drained of expression. Grace kept her head down, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. My father sat motionless, his gaze unfocused. I pulled my car keys from my purse, walked down the hallway, past walls lined with family photos, smiling faces at parties, but hardly any with me in them. I opened the door. The sunset poured in, warm yet suffocating. Behind me were three people I had once loved more than anything. But in that heavy silence, I heard my own voice clearly. It was time to step out of the role they had forced on me without ever asking. I left the house without looking back. When the door clicked shut behind me, it felt like a draft of cold air sliding into my collar on an April evening. I didn't cry. I simply drove through the quiet streets, yellow lights blurring across the windshield like smeared paint. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The room was still quiet, only the hum of a printer in the far corner and faint typing from the tech team. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, but my eyes just stared at the screen, unable to read a single line. "You okay?" I looked up. It was Jamie, my closest colleague at the firm. She carried 2 coffees, set one in front of me, and pulled up a chair without waiting for me to answer. "You look like you just walked through a storm." I gave a faint laugh. Feels more like I've been living in an earthquake for 2 years and only now realized it. Jamie didn't press. She waited. I sat quietly for a few moments, then I told her, not as if venting anger, but like untangling knots one by one. I told her about paying the mortgage, about the credit card in my name used for Grace, about the graduate tuition, my father's secret account, and the confrontation yesterday. Jamie listened silently, her eyes steady, never interrupting. When I finished, she slid the coffee closer, her voice soft but firm. "You don't owe anything to people who don't respect your sacrifice." I nodded, but the heaviness remained. It wasn't just being exploited, it was the deeper ache of being erased as if it were natural. At lunch, I pulled out my phone and dialed Uncle Henry. My mother's younger brother, a retired high school literature teacher, living alone in a small house by the river in Beacon. I didn't explain much, only said I wanted to visit for tea. He told me to come that afternoon. "Bring whatever you've been hiding, both in your hands and in your heart." When I arrived, the sun had softened. His small, white wooden house with ivy climbing the porch looked exactly as it did in my memory. Uncle Henry was trimming lavender when he saw me. He smiled gently and invited me in. We sat on the back porch. A breeze moved through the trees, leaves rustling, mingling with the jasmine tea he poured. "What's brought you to me, Autumn?" I pulled a thick binder from my bag and set it on the table between us. "I need you to read this before I speak." He flipped through slowly, his eyes lingering longest on the large payments. He said nothing for nearly 10 minutes, only the sound of pages turning, the wind stirring, and the soft crackle of hot water being poured. Finally, he set it down and looked at me. "How long have you been silent?" 2 years, I said. "And you never told anyone?" I shook my head. He leaned back, his eyes distant for a moment before speaking. "I'm not surprised. I've seen glimpses of this story before. I always suspected my sister, but I never imagined it had gone this far." I stayed quiet, waiting. Grace was spoiled from the start. After your father died, your mother clung to her. as if she were the center of the universe to make up for everything. And you just 10 years old, you were told to be strong because the older sister carries the load. She told you that the very first day I stepped into the house after your father's funeral. So you knew, of course. But every time I tried to say something, she brushed me off, saying I didn't understand. Motherhood. He paused to pour more tea. My throat tightened. No one had ever validated what I felt. That it wasn't just in my head. That there really had been injustice and someone else had seen it. I want to end this, I said hoarsely. I don't want to be the family's silent wallet anymore. But if I stop completely, everything will collapse. Sometimes you have to let things collapse for people to see where they built it wrong. But I still think about Grace. She never asked for money. It was all Mom. Henry nodded. I'm not telling you to cut her off, but they need to face the consequences of exploitation, and that means you can't keep hiding. Bring everything into the light, Autumn. I looked at his hands, long, marked with age spots, yet steady, the same hands that once wrote poetry on a chalkboard when I was a child. Should I say it all in front of the family? I asked. You must. Otherwise, the story will continue in another form. And once again, you'll be the only one whose feelings are never asked. I drew in a deep breath, as if bracing for a storm. I opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts, seeing my mother, father, and Grace silently listed on the screen. I didn't type a word. I only held on to Henry's words. Bring everything into the light. No more silence. No more hoping they'll understand. If I don't speak, no one will listen. After tea with Uncle Henry, I went home and sat at my desk the entire evening, the lamp burning, my mind racing. On the floor were folders labeled with colored tags, categories of expenses, bank statements, transfers I had saved for 2 years. I added a new label to the thickest black binder: family, unaccounted finances. I printed extra copies, highlighted the most critical items in yellow, but as I reviewed one more section, a transaction made my blood run cold. A personal loan for $35,000 had been opened at a small bank upstate. Borrower, Autumn Weller. The file included a passport copy, signature, employment details. Everything looked legitimate except I had never set foot in that bank. And I had never applied for any loan near that amount. I sat frozen, holding the papers, not because of the money, but because of the shock. Someone had used my personal information systematically, deliberately. I called the bank, posing as myself, to confirm the details. The staff confirmed the applicant was Autumn Weller, approved 8 months ago, funds dispersed, payments already delinquent. When I asked about the purpose, the staff replied. According to the file, the borrower stated the loan was for investing in a residential real estate startup project in Charleston, South Carolina. I could barely breathe. Charleston, the very city my father once casually mentioned over dinner, saying he was considering investing in a redevelopment property. I had thought it was just idle talk, but now it was clear. They had used my name. No asking, no informing, no permission. I pulled up my personal credit file on my laptop. My score had dropped nearly 40 points since last month. A new alert glared in orange. Delinquent loan, negative impact on credit. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat pounding. Again, and again. I steadied my hand on the desk. If I didn't act, the consequences wouldn't just be numbers. I was head of strategic investments at a publicly listed company. Any issue with creditworthiness could jeopardize the professional reputation I had spent over a decade building. I couldn't let that happen. I gathered all the loan documents into a large envelope, sealed it, and wrote in red ink across the front, "Unauthorized loan, legal action if repeated." I locked it in the secure cabinet beside my desk where I kept the most critical files. Then I opened a new document, A summary. Not for the bank, for my family. Line by line, detail by detail, with evidence, I organized everything into a thick black binder with hard covers, each section marked with colored tabs. Mortgage, 28,800. Grace's tuition, 19,400. Credit cards, 9,200. Car repairs. Household bills, 3,600. Unauthorized loan, 35,000. Grand total, 96,000. I wrote that figure in red marker on the very first page, centered boldly. When I closed the binder, it sat on my desk like something far heavier than paper. Inside was not only money, but trust eroded, endurance exploited, and my reputation used as collateral. I sent an email to Uncle Henry, attaching scans of everything. The subject line was simply, "The truth." Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Autumn, I've read it," his voice calm, though I caught the worry beneath. "If you hadn't stopped it now, what else might they have done?" I gripped the phone, staring out the window at the city lights glowing against the night. They thought I would never push back. "And now? What are you going to do?" "I'm going to put everything in order. And this time, no one will be able to deny it." He was silent for a moment, then said softly, "I'll be there." I ended the call, slid the binder into my backpack, and locked it tight. On the desk was still the cup of tea from the night before, cold now. I took a small sip. The bitterness was sharp but real. Just like the feeling pressing inside my chest, clear, awake, no longer avoiding the truth. I wasn't confused anymore about my role in the family. I no longer mistook sacrifice for submission. I held what they never expected me to hold. And the next time I showed up, no one would be able to look away. My mother called me Thursday afternoon. Her voice was cold as ice, no greeting, no mention of the confrontation before. "Sunday, 6 p.m., family meeting, at the house. Don't be late." I paused for a moment before replying, "I'll be there." Not because I was obeying, but because I was ready, and because I had invited someone my mother didn't know about. On Sunday evening, I arrived 15 minutes early, binder of evidence tucked under my arm. The house looked the same, white picket fence, sparrows chirping in the yard. But the air was different, heavy, strained, as if even the walls knew peace wouldn't live here today. My father sat at the dining table in a white buttoned-up shirt, as if preparing for a board meeting. My mother stood at the counter, wiping the spotless surface over and over. Grace sat at the far end, cradling a teacup without drinking, her eyes darting from one of them to me. "Hello, everyone," I said softly, pulling out a chair and setting the binder down on the polished wood table. My mother turned, didn't greet me, only pulled out a chair and sat, eyes locked on mine. "Your father and I have thought carefully. If you continue supporting the family, we'll acknowledge it. I'll tell everyone you've been behind the finances. Grace will be grateful. But your contributions must continue, at least until things are stable again." I opened the binder, not responding. My hand flipped through tabs slowly, each page like an indictment I had prepared for 2 years. "I don't need false recognition," I said calmly, my voice firm. "I only need the truth to be seen and called by its name." My mother's brow tightened, my father frowned. Grace lowered her eyes. I pushed the binder to the center of the table. "This is a full record of every expense I've covered these past 2 years. 24 mortgage payments, tuition, credit cards, car repairs, living costs, and an unauthorized loan, totaling $96,000, all under my name." My father cleared his throat. "Autumn, these things don't need to be blown out of proportion. Every family goes through hardship. You're better off than your sister." "No one is better off when their name is stolen for a loan," I cut in, staring straight at him. A $35,000 loan under my name, invested badly, now damaging my credit score. That isn't family help, that's exploitation. Silence. My mother crossed her arms, tilting her head as if I were being dramatic. Can you stop now? She said. We get it, but did you need to drag it out in front of everyone? I smiled faintly. Yes, because today it's not just the three of you. At that moment, a knock echoed at the door. I rose and opened it. Uncle Henry walked in, tall, lean, with a brown leather bag in hand and seriousness written on his face. Good evening, he said, setting his bag on the table and sitting beside me. Autumn asked me to be here as a witness, and I wanted to hear it all myself. I've suspected things in this house for a long time. My mother's face went pale. Henry, you have no right. You're not the only Weller in this house, he interrupted, his voice steady, firm. If Autumn has been hurt and exploited like this, I can't sit quietly. I flipped to the loan section. Here is the loan. Forged application, falsified signature, proof documents. If I hadn't caught this, the damage wouldn't just be numbers, it would be my career, my reputation, my life. Grace shot to her feet. Wait, what? That loan is in your name? I nodded. And you thought Mom and Dad were paying your tuition? The car you drive, the laptop, the phone, the credit card, your living expenses, they've all come from my account. Grace's eyes widened, her lips trembling. Mom said, she told me it was savings. I didn't know. I looked at her. For the first time in years, her eyes held no confidence, only fear and regret. Uncle Henry placed his hand on my shoulder, firm but gentle. You're not wrong to stop Autumn. Sometimes it takes someone breaking the silence for a family to finally face the truth. My mother's voice cracked. We did it for the family. She's still young, and you're strong enough. No one is meant to carry others forever, I replied. And no one deserves to be treated as the family bank. My mother fell silent. My father lowered his gaze, tapping the table nervously. Grace slowly sat back down, her hands trembling as she flipped through the binder. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know I was living off you all this time. I thought Mom and Dad were still taking care of me. I didn't answer right away. I only looked at her, watching the subtle but undeniable shift in her understanding. Uncle Henry tilted his head toward me. You did the right thing. The truth isn't easy to hear, but it has to be spoken. I looked around the room. No one argued, no one denied. Everything was finally on the table, clear, undeniable. No more pretending. Grace's engagement party was held on a sunny Saturday afternoon at a luxury hotel along the Hudson River. Crystal chandeliers glistened overhead, cream silk tablecloths draped the banquet tables, and a small stage bloomed with white roses and lavender. Everything was arranged perfectly, from the champagne poured to exact measure to the soft strains of orchestral music in the background. I entered wearing a long coat, carrying a silver-wrapped gift box. Inside was a portfolio hard-bound, neatly organized, complete with index, numbers, dates, and bank stamps confirming each transaction, every dollar I had paid for the family. Every line quietly drained under my name. I spotted Uncle Henry in the corner, speaking with a relative. His eyes met mine, and he gave a small nod. I wasn't alone. On stage, the MC invited my father to speak. He took the microphone, adjusted his tie, and smiled. Today is a day of great pride. Grace, our gentle, talented, promising daughter, is stepping into a new chapter of life, and we, as her parents, have done everything to lift her to this moment. Applause thundered. I looked around. Nearly 100 guests, Grace's colleagues, relatives from both sides, all raising glasses, smiling, nodding as if watching a flawless celebration. I walked slowly to the long banquet table at the center. Grace sat at the head, her gown glittering under the chandeliers, her face radiant like a portrait painted long ago. I set the box before her. "A gift for your engagement," I said, my voice soft but caring enough to hush nearby conversations. Grace smiled, a little surprised. "Thank you." "Open it," I said quietly. She lifted the paper, opened the lid. Her smile faltered when she saw the black binder, silk-lined, with silver-embossed words, "Family Expenses, Autumn Weller." She opened to the first page, turned slowly, her eyes widened. Her lips pressed, then parted as if the numbers were draining the air from her lungs. Around us, the murmurs grew. Guests began turning toward us. My parents froze on stage, their eyes wavering. "What is this, Grace?" one of her friends asked. Grace looked up at me, then squarely at our parents. "Is it true?" Her voice shook. "Everything in here, all this money came from her?" No answer. She held up a page. "The car I drive is under her name. My graduate tuition, too. Even this party part of the hotel deposit came from her." "Why?" My mother stepped down from the stage, her face strained. "Grace, don't ruin the party. This is family business. We'll talk later." "Later? How many years have been later? How could you all silently use her name for a loan without asking her once?" Grace flipped to the next page and read aloud. "Fraudulent credit loan, $35,000. Payment overdue. Negative impact on credit score." The hall erupted in whispers. Curious stares turned to shock, then confusion. An aunt from my father's side approached me, her voice lowered. "Is this true? You really paid all of this?" I nodded, unzipped my bag, and pulled out a bound copy. "I have every document, every bank signature, every payment confirmation. It's all here." Uncle Henry stepped forward, his voice carrying clear over the chaos. "My niece Autumn has been carrying this family in silence, not only with money, but with the responsibility that should have been shared. And tonight, that silence ends." My father cleared his throat, trying to recover his composure. "Autumn is better off than Grace. It makes sense she helps. Helping doesn't mean being exploited." I cut in, my eyes steady on his. "If I hadn't checked my credit report, I could have lost my job. 10 years of building a career could collapse because my parents thought I could handle it." I turned to Grace. "I don't blame you. You never asked, and you were never put in a position to answer. But I hope from tonight on, you'll see things differently. No celebration is perfect if it's built on someone else's unconditional sacrifice." Grace laid her hand on the binder, frozen. Then slowly, she turned to our parents. "I used to think everything was smooth because you took care of it. Turns out it was because someone else was carrying it, all branded as the one who doesn't need help. I don't want to begin my marriage on a foundation built from that kind of silence." Then she turned back to me. "Thank you. I've lived too long in a comfortable illusion, never stopping to ask, who's paying the price for this?" The sound in the room drained away. No music, no glasses raised. A few guests quietly slipped out. Grace's closest friends whispered among themselves, then reached for their coats. The entire room seemed to crack, the decorative walls unable to hold up the facade of the perfect family my parents had spent years constructing. And me, I stood beneath the golden light of the chandelier, not proud, not vindictive, just lighter, lighter from shedding a shadow I had carried for years without a name. I left the party once night had fully settled, the glow from the grand hall still faint through the tall glass like a memory refusing to close. I didn't look back. I didn't rush. I didn't tremble. Everything inside me was clear enough to leave fear behind. All I knew was that after this night, my life would move in a different direction. The next morning, I sat at my desk in my small Brooklyn apartment, a cold cup of coffee by my side as email notifications pinged. Among the work messages was one from the HR department, of a software firm in Seattle. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the position of Data Architecture Team Lead. Start date, the 1st of next month. Annual salary, $138,000. Please confirm within 72 hours. I sat still for a long time. Then a calm smile spread across my face. There was nothing left to weigh. For years, I had lived with the thought that I needed to stay close to family to preserve some illusion of duty, closeness, or even compensation. But I finally understood that no one has the right to chain my life with blood obligation without my consent. I clicked reply. I accept. I look forward to beginning this new journey with your company. Right after, I opened my to-do list. First, pay off the remainder of my student loans within 6 months. With this new salary, I could do it without cutting back on anything personal. Second, find a new apartment in Seattle near a park, where I could start mornings walking under real trees, not between concrete and honking horns. Third, inform the family. I didn't call. I wrote an email. I wanted words on record, no interruptions, no guilt-laden voices twisting them. I have accepted a new position in Seattle. I will move at the end of the month. From now on, I will not provide financial support to any family member. I ask to be respected as an independent individual. Any past debts under my name but used by others are being handled with legal counsel. I hold no resentment, but I cannot continue in a relationship without boundaries. Minutes later, my father called. His name flashed repeatedly, Dad. I didn't pick up. An hour later, my mother texted, "What are you doing?" Last time was just a misunderstanding. If you leave like this, what will happen to the family? I didn't reply. That night, Grace sent an email. Unlike Mom's message, hers was short and sincere. Autumn, I've read through the entire binder you left. I don't know what to say other than I'm sorry. I lived in a cushioned world without realizing who kept it from breaking. Now I'm starting to pay for everything myself. I'm learning to budget, learning to say no to casual coffee outings I once thought were nothing. I don't blame you. I know it may not be enough for forgiveness, but if possible, I'd like to see you. Not to ask for anything, but to listen and to make amends. I read it 3 times. I didn't cry, but my eyes stung as if with smoke. I typed back simply, I'll be leaving New York at the end of the month. If you want to meet, let me buy you a coffee at West Central Park. Sunday, 3 p.m. Don't bring anything, just yourself. Sunday, Grace came. She wore a gray sweater and simple jeans. No makeup, no designer bag. Her eyes carried something I had never seen before, unshielded sincerity. We sat on a stone bench, sipping hot coffee from an old Italian vendor's cart. Neither of us mentioned the numbers. Neither of us pointed at blame, only the wind, rustling leaves, and real questions. Were you ever afraid I'd hate you? Grace asked softly. I was afraid you'd never understand. Now I understand some. And I want to learn the rest, if you'll let me. I looked at her. She was no longer just the image of a spoiled younger sister. She was trying to stand on her own legs. I didn't need her to be perfect. I only needed her to want it for herself. I touched her hand lightly. I'm not going back, but I'm not shutting the door either. We sat there for a long time, no many words, just 2 women sisters trying to find again. A thread once pulled too tight but never quite broken. If we were careful, if we were honest, maybe it would hold. Not through sacrifice anymore, but through choice and respect. 6 months after leaving New York, my small apartment in northern Seattle had become familiar. The windows faced east, greeting the morning Sunday. A cactus on the sill stayed alive even when I forgot to water it. No more sleepless nights over bank statements. No surprise calls asking for temporary help. just sparrows tapping on the eaves, rain pattering on the balcony, and sometimes my laughter echoing through the kitchen as I cooked simple meals for myself instead of ordering takeout. I had paid off nearly half my student debt, something I once thought impossible. Each month, an automatic transfer went through, steady and stress-free. Every dollar spent now was mine, with no one saying, "You've got plenty, just help a little." I met with Uncle Henry weekly over Zoom, sometimes sharing little stories, sometimes reading each other passages he was writing. Once he said, "Autumn, I think what you're doing is incredibly brave. Not everyone dares step outside the mold of family to shape one of their own." I only smiled, not admitting how many years I had worn myself down searching for a mold that finally fit. I had also made new friends here. Annie, a colleague in the tech department, often invited me for evening walks. Dave upstairs, who knew how to fix pipes and baked wonderful bread. Jessica, the cafe owner nearby, who always made my latte just right without needing a reminder. They didn't know much about my past, never pried too deep, but they always listened when I spoke. And that was enough to make me feel I truly belonged somewhere. Grace came to Seattle in the 7th month. She let me know with a short text, nothing too formal. "I have a week off. If you're not busy, I'd like to stop by." I replied, "I'll always make time if you need me." She arrived on an autumn afternoon. A neat camel coat, her hair tied low, eyes quieter yet brighter. I met her at the airport and we walked together toward the light rail station, exchanging small talk. I asked if her flight was smooth. She asked if I was getting used to Seattle's weather. Neither of us brought up the past. It wasn't necessary. We both knew that if something still needed to be said, the words would find their way out. That evening, I took Grace to a small restaurant in the neighborhood. She looked around and smiled. "This place is exactly what I imagined you'd choose: quiet, warm lights, and the smell of toasted bread." I ordered 2 bowls of cream of mushroom soup and a bottle of white wine. When the food arrived, she pushed her glass toward me and said softly, "Let me speak first, before you ask anything." I nodded. "I've paid off my credit card balance in 4 months, and I've learned what it feels like to choose between fixing a phone or buying cold medicine. I'm learning to live without leaning on anyone. Maybe I'm still clumsy at it, but at least now I know every expense has weight. It's not just money, it's time, it's trade-offs." I listened without interrupting. "I also understand now why you stayed silent all those years, and I don't blame you for speaking out. I only wish I had realized sooner." I took her hand. Grace's hand was no longer soft like before. It carried small calluses near her thumb, proof that she had begun steering her own life. "It's never too late to learn how to stand up," I said quietly. The next day, we walked through the arboretum. The leaves had begun to change color, reds and golds lining the path. She didn't ask if I planned to go back to New York. She only asked, "Are you happy here?" I looked around the stone paths, the rustling trees, sunlight spilling through leaves. Then I turned to her. "I feel like I'm living my own life. Sometimes lonely, sometimes empty, but no longer drained. And that, to me, is a kind of happiness." We sat on a stone bench overlooking a small pond. A few maple leaves floated quietly on the water. She rested her head on my shoulder, saying nothing more. I wrapped an arm around her, needing no further explanation. A few weeks after Grace returned to New York, I received an email from an old family friend, a distant aunt I always called Aunt Maggie. "Your parents have been unusually quiet. I don't know what happened between you, but I've heard they're selling the house. Seems they can't manage anymore." I didn't reply. I simply closed the phone and sat alone on the windowsill. I felt no gloating, no pity, just lightness. The kind of lightness that comes when you finally take off a soaked coat after a long storm. Family, I once thought it was irreplaceable. But I came to understand that true family isn't the people who demand endless sacrifice, but the ones who stop when they see you're running dry. I may not have been born into a family that knew that, but I can choose to build a home of my own with people who truly listen and respect my boundaries. And that's exactly what I'm doing, piece by piece, in this city of long rains and patient skies, so much like my own journey. I don't know if the choices I've made look anything like what you've been through. Maybe you've lived in a family where sacrifice was expected, where kindness blurred into obligation. Or maybe you've only watched from the outside, wondering, was Autumn too harsh? Or did she do the right thing? I ask myself those questions every day, not to regret, but to make sure I'm living a life with meaning, with limits, and above all, with choices that are mine. And you? What do you think about the way I chose to face my family, responsibility, and my own boundaries? If it were you, would you stay silent and keep going as before, or would you speak up to protect yourself? I'd love to hear your story, your perspective. Leave a comment because maybe what you share will help someone out there finally speak the truth they've been hiding. And if any part of my story touched you, even for a moment, hit subscribe. Because I believe there are so many more pieces of life waiting to be told. Stories of family, of hurt, of healing, and of the moments we learn to rise for ourselves. I'll keep sharing piece by piece, and I hope you'll stay with me.